Hello, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do a bit of reading, okay? We're going to do some research. Okay, this says, in 1962, the Subcommittee on Poultry Nutrition of the National Research Council revised its recommended calcium requirement for laying hens. A level of 2.75% was adopted as a new recommendation, based on the many reports indicating the need for more calcium than the 2.25 previously recommended. The 2.75 level of calcium also was recommended in the fifth revised edition of the nutrient requirements of poultry. However, Person reported that a level of at least 3.4% was necessary for maximum eggshell quality. They also noted that environmental temperature had an important influence upon the required calcium level. Numerous other reports have provided evidence for a dietary calcium requirement greater than 2.75% for maximum shell quality. A deficiency of calcium is generally recognized to cause a decline in egg production and a reduction in the thickness of the eggshell. The effects of excess calcium are somewhat controversial. Titus reported no detrimental effects upon egg production with calcium levels as high as 5 to 6%. However, Bragg reported a decrease in egg production when a laying ration contained 4.25% calcium as compared to lower levels. Yatowska and Parkhurst had earlier reported a decrease in egg production and a reduction in feed efficiency when the calcium level was increased from 2.25% to 3.95%. So we want to know what is the best percentage of calcium to give our laying hens without causing them harm and to have stronger shells. So let's see. Results presented in this report. I'm just taking different parts of this and we're reading it. Results presented in this report with single comb white Leghorn hen showed that a level of 3.5% total calcium in a complete laying ration produced eggshell thickness, specific gravities of eggs, and egg production rates that were not improved by supplementing the diet with higher levels of calcium. This level was found to be adequate even among hens that were laying or near 100% production during much of the experimental period. Upon establishment of the maximum shell thickness, which could be achieved by supplementation of the complete laying ration with great levels of pulverized limestone, experiments were undertaken to determine if it is possible to further improve eggshell quality by substitution of hand-sized oyster shell for part or all of the pulverized limestone in the complete laying ration. It was hypothesized that oyster shell particles would accumulate in the gizzard during the day and dissolve slowly throughout the night, and thus maintain a higher blood calcium level than might occur in hens which receive very high calcium levels during the daytime hours, but no dietary calcium throughout the night. Since the egg remains in the shell gland for approximately 20 hours, certain hens may not have the ability to withdraw sufficient calcium from the bones to produce maximum shell thickness during the 6 to 8 hours of the night when they are normally not receiving any calcium from the feed. The results of the two experiments on this subject are also presented in this report. The result presented in Table 2 showed that under the conditions of this experiment, 2.5% of dietary calcium was slightly deficient and that 5% calcium was excessive. Hens fed only 2.5% calcium tended to overconsume, while those receiving 5% calcium consumed appreciably less feed than hens receiving the intermediate calcium levels. The lowest calcium level used in this experiment was adequate to support maximum egg production. In contrast, the highest calcium level used significantly reduced egg production. Egg shell thickness and specific gravity measurements showed a significant decrease in the eggs produced by the hens receiving 2.5% calcium, as compared with those receiving higher levels of calcium. Increasing the dietary calcium above 3.5% produced no further improvements in egg shell thickness. The average results after 9 months of lay show that while the shell quality of the eggs produced by the hens receiving only pulverized limestone had dropped to 2.21 kilograms, the breaking strength of the eggs from the hens receiving hand-sized oyster shell substituted for 2/3 of the pulverized limestone still showed an average breaking strength of 2.87 kilograms. This difference is not only highly significant, but lies in the range wherein those eggs which had eggshell quality lower than the breaking strength of 2.25 kilograms, 5 pounds, would readily undergo breakage in a modern egg processing plant, while eggs having a breaking strength average above 6 pounds are likely to show very little breakage under similar conditions. This statement is based upon unpublished studies of the breaking strength of eggs from a commercial processing plant. Only about 4% egg breakage occurred in eggs having a breaking strength above 6 pounds, while over 8% breakage occurred in eggs showing a breaking strength of 4.5 to 5 pounds. In an effort to determine if the improved eggshell strength shown to result from substitution of hand-sized oyster shell for a portion of the pulverized limestone is due to higher plasma calcium levels of the hens during the nighttime hours, blood was removed from 5 hens in each treatment at 4 a.m. and again at 4 p.m. after the hens had been in lay for approximately 8 months. The blood taken by venipuncture from the wing was removed only from hens that were known to be in active egg production at the time of sampling. Calcium was determined by atomic absorption on the deproteinized plasma of each hen. The result presented in Table 5 show that the hens receiving 2/3 oyster shell and 1/3 limestone had 17% higher blood calcium levels at 4 a.m. than those receiving the same total calcium level supplied entirely as pulverized limestone. The present study indicates that when hens receive all supplemental calcium as pulverized limestone, 4.8 grams of calcium per hen per day is inadequate, and that maximum results are obtained with calcium levels ranging between 3.2 and 3.8 grams of calcium intake per hen per day. In regard to the use of the oyster shell, Stewart and Hart reported that hens receiving 2.3% calcium in the diet and fed oyster shell consumed less total calcium than did hens receiving 8% finely ground calcium carbonate in the diet, approximately 3%. The hens receiving combination of pulverized calcium carbonate and oyster shell produced more eggs on less feed than were obtained with the all limestone diet, and the breaking strength of the eggs from the oyster shell hens was also superior to that of any other group. And I believe that's my stopping point on this tab. Hooser and Norse also found using a diet containing only 1% calcium together with oyster shells superior results in egg production and breaking strength of the eggs as compared in those of hens receiving a complete diet containing ground limestone. The results of the present experiments confirm the findings of Stewart and Hart and Hauser and Norris, and show furthermore that excellent results can be obtained with the addition of oyster shells directly in the complete ration in place of an equal amount of pulverized calcium carbonate. In the present studies, the calcium content of the diets was always maintained at 3.5%. It is highly probable that a lower total calcium level will suffice when two-thirds of the calcium supplement is hen-sized oyster shell. This suggestion is based on the finding that with oyster shells in the diet, the hens have an opportunity to absorb calcium from the intestinal tract during the entire 24 hours of each day, whereas hens receiving diets containing only pulverized calcium carbonate must obtain all their dietary calcium during the daytime, approximately 14 to 16 hours. This additional absorption time could help the oyster shell fed hens to be more efficient in their utilization of dietary calcium. This conclusion is supported by the recent findings of Quisenberry and Walker. For these same reasons, it is likely that the practice of adding oyster shells to complete diets already contain 3 to 4% calcium will produce markedly inferior results. I'll repeat that. It is likely that the practice of adding oyster shells to complete diets that already contain 3 to 4% calcium will produce markedly inferior results. You don't want to add calcium if they're already getting 3 to 4% calcium. You don't want to add oyster shells because it will produce inferior results as compared to the diet without adding oyster shells. The results of experiment 1 showed that 5% calcium supplied by supplemental pulverized limestone was excessive, causing decreased egg production. Assuming that the use of oyster shell produces a further improvement in calcium absorption, it appears likely that egg production may be decreased more by adding 1.5% calcium as oyster shell on top of a complete ration than it would by increasing the calcium level from 3.5 to 5% by adding additional pulverized limestone. Hurwitz and Bornstein showed that a dietary calcium level of 4.5% depressed feed consumption and egg weight as compared to the results with 3% calcium and high energy diets. From these results and those presented in the present report, it appears that maximum calcium intake, which can be tolerated without depression of feed consumption, is approximately about 4 to 4.5 grams per hen per day. Results have been presented which show that when pulverized limestone is used as the only calcium supplement in a complete laying mash for hens, maximum production and eggshell quality are attained when the diet contains 3.5% calcium. The calcium intake of 2.8 grams of calcium per hen per day was inadequate and caused an increase in feed consumption and a significant decrease in eggshell quality. The calcium level of 5% was excessive and caused a decrease in feed consumption and decreased egg production, and yet did not improve eggshell quality above the obtained with 3.5% calcium. Further results showed that the substitution of a hen-sized oyster shell for two-thirds of the pulverized limestone usually present in complete laying rations resulted in an improvement in average eggshell strength, which appeared to be due to a constant metering of calcium from the gizzard into the bloodstream of the hens. So, how much calcium is too little for laying hens, and how much calcium is too much? if you purchase 16% layer feed, does it already contain too much calcium? Some people say that it does, so we need to know that. And if you add oyster shell, if you add calcium on top of that, and it already contains enough or too much, then you're doing more harm than good. Is it the right kind of calcium that's in the layer feed? Studies show that around 3.4% and 3.5% calcium, with 2/3 being oyster shell calcium and 1/3 being pulverized limestone, it helps the chickens to lay eggs with stronger eggshells, while around 4% and 5% calcium is too much and can have adverse and even harmful effects on your laying hens. It says if your feed already contains a percentage of calcium needed and giving them oyster shell creates too much calcium, then it will do more harm than good. Some people argue that the amount of calcium in laying feed is already too much and harmful to layer hens and may not even be the right kind of calcium. If you create your own feed, you need to account for how much calcium is in each ingredient, as such things like flaxseed may contain high amounts of calcium. Also, do any of your ingredients need to be put through a coffee grinder before feeding it to the chickens? Tallying up the percentage of protein is not the only important thing to consider, as you also need to consider how much calcium and where they need to get their calcium from and what is better. When you're watching YouTube videos of people claiming their recipe yields high protein, you may find that many of them only yield about 10% protein when you do the math, and that some people who tally up the percentage of protein in ingredients that they're using, if and when they add them up, as if they contain much more protein than they do, to try to prove that their combination of feed is around 16%, even when it is still only around 10%. Somebody might say that one ingredient is 30% protein when it's only like 10% protein, to prove their point, even though it's not correct. Some of these people might be putting ingredients that are poisonous to chickens in the recipe, or that may need to be put through a coffee grinder. Take the time, do the research, okay? And I want to show you where this came from. This is from, here it is right here so you can read it. The calcium requirements of laying hens and effects of dietary oyster shell upon eggshell quality. M.L. Scott, S.J. Hull, and P.A. Molenhoff, Department of Poultry Science, Cornell University. Received for publication November 16th, 1970, so that you can see that. And then we'll go down. And they have their acknowledgments and their references, so that you can see those as well. And if you're creating your own feed, and you're putting things like corn, wheat, oats, millets, Milo, whatever ingredients you might be using, you need to know if there's calcium already in those ingredients. If one of your ingredients is layer pellet feed, like this one, it says that their calcium level minimum is 3.5% and the maximum is 4.5%. And so to me, 4.5% might be too much calcium. So that's just my opinion based on what I've been reading. So, and we often use some sort of 16%. This is organic crumble, so this isn't the regular layer feed, and we often use the regular layer feed, and I'm having a hard time finding out how much calcium is in it, because I don't know if I want them to have 4.5%, but that's what we've been using. Well, I'm not saying we're using that brand, I'm just saying that we've been using layer pellet feed, because they've already measured, they've already done the research, they already know how much of each ingredient and each how much nutrition they need. And so to me it's easier, and they know if it needs to be ground, and it's ground, it's easier for the chickens to digest. But then we give them other treats on top of that, and so that total their minimum probably is closer to the 3.5%, but I don't know where that 3.5% is coming from, and I don't know if it's coming from the oyster shell calcium. And now I feel like they need to have 2/3 oyster shell calcium and 1/3 pulverized limestone, from doing this research. So I'm just saying you need to do your own research, and you need to find out, what you feel is best after doing that research. So it helps to do your own research and not just watch videos and take other people's words for it. And I mean that even on taking my word for it. You should do more research and find out. So this is what I was looking at today, and I wanted to share this with you, and I wanted to show the parts of what I had read that stood out to me, and wanted to share those with you. And you can go and read this in completion and find out what the rest of it says. You can download it and save it as a PDF. You can print it out. And they have other, if you go to sciencedirectassets.com, they have other articles as well that you can find with different research and different information. Anyway, please feel free to leave comments and let me know what your thoughts are on this. And thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great day. Bye-bye.